What if one act of kindness, just one simple breakfast, could change the course of 5 lives forever? When a quiet single dad, running a small-town diner, helped a wounded soldier and her twin girls, he thought it was just the right thing to do. But the next morning, 20 military trucks rolled into town, and leading them was a 4-star general with a secret that would leave everyone speechless. This is a story of quiet heroes, forgotten promises, and the kind of healing that doesn't come from medals, but from love. If stories like this speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of hope, kindness, and second chances. Now, let's begin. The sun crept over the rust-colored hills of Arizona, casting soft, golden light across the sleepy town of Ashridge. It was the kind of place where time moved a little slower, where neighbors still waved to each other from across the street, and where the smell of bacon and fresh coffee could drift down Main Street like a call to prayer. On the corner of that street stood Dawson's Diner, a modest single-story building with red trim booths, a jukebox that hadn't worked in years, and a bell above the door that rang with the same hopeful chime every time someone walked in. Michael Dawson, former Delta Force operator, now cook, cleaner, and owner, stood behind the counter in a faded olive green jacket with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hands, calloused and precise, moved with practiced rhythm as he sliced fresh bread. The radio played low in the background, a familiar country tune, humming under the gentle clatter of morning prep. A photograph hung behind him on the wall, an old black-and-white image of a younger Michael dressed in fatigues, standing beside his unit, somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. The caption beneath read, "Some wounds you don't see." He rarely looked at it anymore. At 6:45 a.m., Michael glanced up as the door creaked open, the bell jingling overhead. A soft breeze swept in along with the faint smell of dust and diesel. She stepped in slowly, a young woman in uniform, her face-drawn eyes scanning the diner like it was foreign ground. She held the hands of 2 little girls, both no older than 5, their curls tangled cheeks smudged with travel. Her voice was quiet. "Is this place open?" Michael nodded, wiping his hands on a towel. "Always is. Grab a booth wherever you like." The woman hesitated, then led the girls to the booth near the window. The morning sun caught the edges of her face, and Michael noticed the long red scar that ran down her cheek, fresh, angry, but healing. "Coffee?" he asked, stepping over with a pot. She looked up, startled at the normalcy in his tone. "Yes, please. Just black. And for the ladies," he asked, glancing at the twins. "Just some milk if that's okay. We're between things right now." Michael offered a small smile. "Milk with hearts on top coming right up." The girls giggled as he winked and walked away. A few minutes later, he returned with a tray, 2 warm cups of milk, with heart shapes dusted in cocoa, and a plate of peanut butter toast cut into triangles. For the woman, black coffee, and a sandwich with crispy bacon egg and lettuce. No menu. No prices. She blinked. "We didn't order yet. I figured you looked like someone who didn't want to think too hard this morning," he said simply. "Besides, it's on the house." She opened her mouth to protest, but something in his voice, calm, sure, kind, stopped her. "I'm Anna," she finally said. "Anna Monroe. Just got discharged from the VA hospital 2 towns over. Our car broke down outside of town last night. I didn't have my wallet." Michael nodded, not pressing. "Michael Dawson. And this," he gestured around the room, "is my little corner of peace." The girls were already chewing happily. One of them, mouth full, piped up. "Mr. M, this is so good," Michael chuckled. "You can call me Mr. M anytime." Anna let out a soft laugh, small, cautious, but genuine. It was the first in a long time. A few tables down, an older couple had just walked in and glanced at Anna's uniform. The man whispered something. The woman stared for a beat too long. Anna stiffened. Michael noticed. He placed a sugar dispenser on the table, then leaned in slightly. "They see the scar before they see the soldier," he said quietly. "But in here, people are just people. And you've got nothing to prove." Her eyes softened just for a moment, and she gave a small nod. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt safe. Comforting, the sunlight poured through the window, catching the gentle curls of the girl's hair, illuminating the quiet grace of a woman trying to hold herself together. Finally, as Anna dabbed her mouth with a napkin, she asked, "Do you always feed strangers who walk in looking like trouble?" Michael shrugged. "Only the ones with good taste in breakfast." She smiled again. It lingered this time. Before she could say anything else, a voice called from the front door. Dad, a boy about 10, tousled brown hair, and a backpack nearly as big as he was, burst in and ran straight to the counter. Michael caught him in one arm and ruffled his hair. "This is my son, Adam," he said proudly. "Best dishwasher in the state of Arizona." Adam glanced over at the girls. "Whoa, you have twins. They're Daisy and Amelia," Anna said. "Don't let their sweetness fool you." "Want to play with the sugar packets?" Daisy asked, holding one up like it was a toy. Adam grinned. "Let's build a castle." As the kids laughed and played, Anna watched them with a distant look. Part grief, part gratitude, part longing. Michael noticed. He didn't ask. He just said gently, "If you're still around later, I make a mean grilled cheese for lunch." Anna looked at him as if trying to decide something. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. You're not," he said, then paused. "You're just here. And sometimes that's enough." The moment lingered. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. Anna sipped her coffee, eyes softening. "Maybe we'll stay a little longer." Michael nodded, then returned to the kitchen. Behind him, the bell above the door jingled again. But this time, he didn't look back. The next morning, the town woke up under a veil of gentle light, the sky painted with strokes of peach and lavender. Dawson's Diner opened its doors just after 6, as always, but that morning something felt subtly different. The counter stools gleamed, the coffee brewed richer, and the old jukebox, though still silent, seemed to carry a quieter kind of music in the air. Michael stood behind the counter towel over his shoulder, restocking the pie case. The bell above the door hadn't rung yet. The first customer of the day would likely be the same as always, old Mr. Finch from the gas station 2 blocks down, still ordering decaf, despite pretending it was regular. But at 6:32 a.m., the bell did ring, and it wasn't Mr. Finch. It was her. Anna Monroe. Same uniform. Same boots. But this time her posture was just a little taller, her steps a little surer. The twins trailed behind her, each holding a stuffed animal that Michael hadn't seen yesterday. Perhaps they had been tucked away in the worn duffel bag now slung over Anna's shoulder. Michael didn't say anything. He just smiled and nodded toward the same booth. "You're early," he said. "I owed someone a proper thank you," she replied softly. He poured her a cup of coffee before she even asked. Today she didn't sit tucked behind the table like a guest. She slid in more comfortably, the way someone might if they were beginning to believe they were welcome. The twins climbed into the booth like it was already theirs. Michael slid over 2 plates of French toast with syrup smiley faces and a plate of eggs for Anna. As she pulled off her jacket, the fabric slipped slightly from her shoulder, and the scar along her cheek caught the morning light again. It was deep, fresh, still healing, not hidden. She saw his eyes flicker to it for a brief moment, and then, instead of averting his gaze like most, Michael leaned casually on the counter and asked creamer this time. Or sticking with black, Anna blinked. She had expected curiosity, or pity, or that subtle tightening of the mouth people did when they didn't want to look but couldn't help it. But this was different. Black, she said, like regrets. Michael chuckled softly. We all drink those eventually. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of something else, acknowledgement perhaps, or understanding. Daisy and Amelia, now clearly at ease, started singing quietly under their breath as they stacked sugar packets into towers. Adam arrived minutes later and joined them with the natural rhythm of someone who had grown up in a diner and around stories he knew not to ask about. Anna watched them, the children's laughter, a balm to something in her chest that had gone tight for months. How long have you lived here? She asked, sipping her coffee. 8 years, Michael replied. Moved here after my last tour. Delta, she asked, almost more of a statement. He nodded. You Army Medical Corps, she said, fingers wrapping around the mug. Forward Operating Base Kanjar, Syria. That's where I met my husband. Michael didn't respond with words, just listened. She paused, took a breath. He didn't make it back. Another silence. But this one hung heavier. Michael didn't try to fill it. He just quietly placed a napkin holder back on the table, straightening it out like it mattered. Anna's fingers instinctively brushed the edge of her scar. You'd think after months of rehab and being surrounded by nurses, I'd stop being self-conscious about this, she muttered. Michael finally looked at her. Really looked, and said gently, You didn't come in here yesterday as a scar. You came in as a mom looking out for her kids. That's what I saw. Anna looked down her throat, tightening. She didn't cry. Not yet, but something uncoiled inside her, a small knot of defensiveness that had kept her upright but distant. You're not what I expected, she said. Most people expect grumpy ex-soldier turned recluse with too many knives and not enough words. He said, lips curling upward. Close, she admitted. Except you make heart-shaped cocoa and smile at strangers. He shrugged. I run a diner. That's what we do. She smiled, and it lingered longer than it had the day before, as the kids played quietly with napkins and salt shakers, creating what looked like some intricate snow fort. Anna leaned forward slightly. I haven't had a real conversation in weeks, she said. Not one that didn't involve paperwork or physical therapy, or someone telling me what I should feel. Michael's tone softened. You don't owe anyone your healing schedule. Anna stared at him. And yet, here I am feeling guilty for just sitting in a booth. You're not sitting. You're resting, he corrected. That's different. Outside, a couple walked past the diner window and glanced in. The man did a slight double-take at Anna's scar. She noticed. Her shoulders tensed. But before the weight of that glance could settle, Amelia climbed into her lap and handed her a crumpled napkin. Mommy, she whispered, we made you a drawing. Anna unfolded it. A messy sketch of a woman, 2 little girls, a man with a spatula, and a big sun shining above a building labeled Mr. M's Diner. Her breath caught. Michael looked over her shoulder and smiled. That's a pretty accurate spatula. I think this might be the first time they've drawn something happy since everything. Anna's voice wavered. Michael didn't press, but his eyes softened, and his voice, barely above a whisper, said, Then maybe you're where you're supposed to be, even just for now. Anna wiped her eyes, brushing away tears before the twins could see. She folded the napkin drawing carefully and tucked it into her jacket pocket. She looked up at him, her voice steadier now. I was planning to leave by noon, Michael nodded. I know, but I'm not sure the car's ready. He nodded again, but this time with a knowing smile. Good thing I used to fix engines before I fixed eggs. She laughed a real laugh, and something in the diner shifted. The walls didn't feel so heavy. The the scar didn't feel so visible. And for the first time in a long while, Anna Monroe didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she might be starting over. The day unfolded like warm, honey, slow, gentle, and just sweet enough to forget the bitterness of what had come before. By late afternoon, the sun over Ash Ridge had shifted westward, spilling golden light across the dusty sidewalks. At Dawson's Diner, the lunch crowd had trickled out. The tables were clean, the coffee fresh again, and a quiet peace had settled into the room, like an old friend dropping by for the afternoon. Michael was wiping down the counter, humming low to a Johnny Cash tune barely audible from the radio. His sleeves were rolled his hair, a little messier than it had been in the morning, and the fine lines around his eyes deepened each time he caught a glimpse of the kids laughing near the window. Adam, his 10-year-old, sat cross-legged on the floor with Daisy and Amelia, the three of them building some kind of architectural marvel from napkin holders, ketchup bottles, and salt packets. A hospital base, Amelia said, with Daisy insisting it needed a helicopter pad. Adam declared himself head engineer. None of them seemed to notice the passage of time. Anna sat nearby, nursing her third cup of coffee. She watched them with a gaze that was at once maternal and marveling. It had been a long time since she had seen her daughters this animated. Since Syria. Since the funeral. Since the nights in the VA hospital, when the only sounds were beeping monitors and whispered nightmares. Michael sat down across from her, sliding a new plate between them, a grilled cheese sandwich cut diagonally with a side of homemade pickles. "I said I'd make it," he said. "Didn't say you had to eat it." Anna smirked. Brave offer. He watched her take a bite, then let out a breath like he'd been holding it. "Well," he asked. She chewed dramatically, then grinned. "It's better than most field rations. Not as good as Army chow in Fallujah." He feigned offense. High bar. They shared a quiet laugh. The kind of laughter that came from people who understood what it meant to find comfort in small things after surviving the worst of things. Anna leaned back slightly, letting her fingers trace the rim of her mug. "Adam's a good kid." "Too smart for his own good," Michael replied. Started fixing his own bike before he turned 6. Then one day, he dismantled my toaster to make it more efficient. It's been on strike ever since. She smiled, then grew thoughtful. "He's gentle." Michael nodded. He saw too much too young. His mom died when he was 5. Cancer. Quick and cruel. I think it taught him something most adults still haven't learned, how to be soft when the world feels hard. Anna looked at him, eyes searching. "You talk about her often." "Every day," he said, voice steady. Not out loud, but in little things. How I fold his lunch bag. The way I remember to put marshmallows in hot cocoa, even when I forget everything else. There was a long pause. Not silence, but understanding. Anna looked down, then quietly said, "My husband's name was Ben. He was good. Solid. Not flashy. The kind of man who made breakfast every morning and walked the girls to school even in uniform." Michael watched her carefully. She had said his name for the first time since she arrived. He was deployed twice, she continued. Second tour, he volunteered to lead a medical convoy outside Manbij. They were ambushed. I was stationed 30 miles away. They wouldn't let me near the site. I never got to say goodbye. Michael didn't respond right away. Just let her speak. "I didn't cry for a long time," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not until Daisy came into my room one night and asked why Daddy hadn't come back to fix the nightlight. That broke me." Michael reached across the table, not with words, but with presence. His hand rested close to hers, not touching, just near enough to say, "You're not alone at this table." Anna blinked away the sting in her eyes and looked out the window. The sun had dipped lower, casting the diner in a soft amber glow. Dust motes danced in the light like lazy fireflies. They talk about him like he's still just on a mission, she said. Maybe he is, Michael said gently. Maybe he's just waiting for you to get some rest before you rejoin him in the memories that matter. Anna turned to him slowly, and something unreadable passed between them. A shared understanding of grief, of service, of what it means to hold yourself together when no one else can do it for you. Outside, a small breeze rustled the wind chimes by the door. "Why did you leave the service?" she asked. Michael hesitated. "A mission in Kabul. Things went sideways. Lost a man I trained, a kid I promised his mother I'd look after. Came home with a chest full of medals and a head full of ghosts." She nodded slowly, eyes still on him. "So now you cook." "Now I serve in a different way," he said. "Food. Silence. A place to be seen." She looked around the diner, the chipped red booths, the worn menu board, the photo of Michael in uniform behind the counter. "It's more than a diner," she said. "It's the one place I know how to build something that doesn't fall apart." Anna smiled faintly. "Well, you might want to reinforce the napkin tower before it collapses." They both turned, just as Amelia let out a triumphant squeal her sugar packet bridge had finally held. Adam clapped. Daisy declared herself chief medical officer and handed out pretend bandages. Michael and Anna watched them for a long moment. "I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again," Anna said. Michael met her gaze. "Maybe you don't need normal. Maybe just quiet and a connection." She looked at him. Like this. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The late sunlight caught her scar again, but this time, it didn't feel like a mark of pain. It felt like a map of where she'd been, and maybe where she could go next. Ashridge was a desert town, but when the storms came, they came without warning. That night, as the last customers left Dawson's diner, and the neon sign buzzed softly in the window, Michael flipped the open sign to closed and stepped outside to inhale the quiet. The sky, once dusted with stars, had turned heavy and dark, smeared with charcoal clouds, stretching low across the horizon. The wind had picked up. Fast. He paused on the sidewalk, narrowing his eyes toward the edge of the lot, where an old, beat-up SUV still sat, parked under a crooked street lamp. It was Anna's. Michael frowned. The engine hadn't turned over all day. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward the vehicle. Rain began to fall soft at first, then harder, hitting the tin roof of the diner like drumming fingers from some restless god. As he got closer, he saw it 3 figures huddled inside. The glow of a phone screen flickered in the dark. Anna sat in the driver's seat, shoulders tight, both hands gripping the steering wheel. In the back, Daisy and Amelia had curled up beneath a thin blanket, their foreheads resting against each other asleep. Michael knocked on the glass. Anna turned, startled, her face lit by the storm outside, and something else, embarrassment. He opened the door before she could speak. "You're not sleeping in this heap through a storm." "We're fine," she said quickly. "I didn't want to intrude. I thought the rain might pass." Thunder cracked overhead, loud and unfiltered. Michael didn't flinch. He leaned in. "Get the girls. Come inside." "Now." Anna hesitated, her pride flaring for just a second. But then Daisy stirred in the back seat, mumbling in her sleep. That was enough. Inside the diner, Michael moved fast. He relit the stove and fired up the old propane heater. The rain hammered harder now, tapping urgently on the windows. Lightning lit up the sky, followed by another deep roll of thunder that shook the glass. He grabbed the emergency blankets from the back closet, the ones he hadn't touched since the Veterans Memorial brunch last fall, and tossed them over the diner booth like makeshift bedding. Anna carried both girls in one on each shoulder. Her knees wobbled slightly from the weight, but she didn't ask for help. Michael watched her lower them onto the cushions, tuck them in tight, and stroke the wet strands from their foreheads with the tenderness of a mother who had held her children through war zones and hospital rooms. When she finally sat down by the stove, her uniform soaked through and clinging to her skin, Michael handed her a towel and a steaming mug. "Hot apple cider," he said. "Was saving it for winter, but—" "Storm's early," she finished, her voice cracking. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling, the kind that wrapped around two people like a blanket after too many nights spent alone. The firelight danced across the walls, casting shadows that moved like old memories. The sound of rain on the windows was steady now, like breath. Anna rubbed her hands together, warming them over the flame. Her eyes flicked to the girls, then to Michael. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Like what he asked. Worn down. No backup plan. No more fight left in me. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low and even. "You brought your girls through deployment, a hospital, a funeral, and across state lines in a broken-down SUV. You don't need to fight tonight. You just need to breathe." Anna blinked, and tears welled up before she could stop them. "I was supposed to be strong," she whispered. "But lately, I feel like a cracked vase someone keeps putting flowers into. It looks okay from far away, but up close." She trailed off. Michael looked at her, his jaw tight, not from judgment, but recognition. He had stood at that same crossroads once, that place between holding it together and falling apart. He reached behind the counter and pulled out a small item from the shelf, a thin leather journal frayed at the edges. "I started writing again last year," he said. "Nothing special. Just pieces of thought." Anna took the journal carefully, flipping through the pages. They were filled with short phrases, some just a few words long, half poems, half prayers. "Be still, soldier. Scars are just the skin remembering. Some days, making coffee is enough." Anna's hands trembled slightly as she closed the journal. "You never talk like a soldier." Michael looked away for a moment. "Because I used to talk like a weapon." The rain outside softened like the sky itself was listening. I thought about giving up once he admitted. After Adam's mother died, I didn't know how to raise a boy in a world I barely survived myself. But then one night, he asked me if I could teach him to make pancakes. Anna smiled faintly. "I didn't have the answer to grief," Michael continued, "but I had a recipe. And that was something." They both sat there for a long moment, staring into the fire. The quiet stretched between them, comfortable grounding. "I think you saved me today," she said softly. Michael shook his head. "No. You saved yourself. I just opened the door." Outside, the storm passed, leaving behind the clean scent of wet earth and the hush of a town asleep. The wind calmed. The lights flickered, once, then held steady. Anna stood and stretched her body, aching but lighter. "Thank you," she said. Michael nodded once, not asking for anything in return. But just before she walked back toward the booth where her daughters slept, she turned back. "You said some days making coffee is enough," she said. "Tomorrow. Maybe I'll make the coffee." Michael raised an eyebrow. "That so?" She smiled. "Just don't expect heart-shaped cocoa art. That's above my rank," he chuckled. "You can wear the apron." Anna disappeared into the shadows, where the girls slept peacefully in the glow of the fire. Michael sat a while longer, staring into the last flickers of flame, his heart quieter than it had been in years. Outside, the storm had ended. But inside the diner, something new had begun. Morning came gently to Ashridge, the sun lifting over the hills, with the kind of quiet grace only desert towns know. A soft amber light bathed Dawson's diner in gold, catching the edges of the window blinds and spilling across the red vinyl booths like warm syrup on pancakes. Inside, the world still slept, except for Michael Dawson. He stood at the stove, already dressed, hair damp from the sink, flipping a skillet with the ease of muscle memory. The sizzle of butter, the faint pop of bacon fat, the smell of coffee brewing, all signs of another day beginning same as always. But today, something was different. There were shoes near the door that weren't his or Adam's. A duffel bag leaned against the corner booth. 2 tiny jackets hung on the coat rack, and from the hallway beyond the kitchen, soft footsteps approached. Anna. She stepped into the light, slowly, hair tousled from sleep, her uniform shirt replaced by a borrowed gray t-shirt that hung loosely over her frame. Her eyes were still tired, but less guarded. She looked at him. "You're up early," she said. He poured coffee into a mug and handed it to her. "Diner doesn't open itself." Anna took a sip, her hands cupped around the warmth, like she wasn't ready to let it go. "I remember mornings like this, on base. Cold, rushed. Everything tasted like mud." Michael smiled faintly. "Well, this one tastes like cinnamon and second chances." She raised an eyebrow. "You always this poetic before 7 a.m. Only when I haven't been shot at the night before." They stood in silence for a moment, broken only by the rhythmic tap of the spatula against the pan. Then, without a word, Anna stepped behind the counter. "I said I'd make the coffee," she said. "Figure I should earn my keep." Michael didn't argue. She fumbled slightly with the filter and spilled a bit of ground coffee on the counter, but when he moved to help, she waved him off. "Combat medic. Remember? I've stitched wounds in moving trucks. I can handle a drip brew." He held up his hands in surrender. "Yes, ma'am." Just then the door creaked open. Adam padded in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, hair flattened on one side like a lopsided bird's nest. He froze when he saw Anna behind the counter. Are we open already?" Anna grinned. "Only to VIPs. Behind him, Daisy and Amelia followed, both still in their pajamas holding hands. They stopped at the sight of their mom pouring coffee and gasped as if she had just conjured fire from thin air. "You're working here?" Daisy asked. "Just this morning," Anna said, feigning seriousness. "But if I mess up the coffee, I might get fired." "You'll need training," Amelia added, eyes wide. Michael turned to the girls. "What do you think? Should we give her a chance?" Adam looked around, taking in the scene: his dad at the stove, Anna behind the counter, the girls yawning and barefoot on the tile. He smiled. "Only if she makes pancakes." Michael gestured toward the table. "Your wish is my batter." They all gathered in the booth near the window. Sunlight poured in, warming their faces. Plates clinked. Laughter stirred. The air smelled like vanilla and salt, and something else, something richer. Belonging. Anna helped pass out plates-filled juice glasses, and once accidentally poured orange juice into a coffee cup. The twins giggled hysterically. Michael just shook his head and slid her a fresh mug. "This one has caffeine," he said. "The others for comic relief." When they all finally sat down to eat, the moment hit Anna harder than she expected. 4 plates, 4 chairs, 4 voices talking over one another. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had breakfast like this. Not in silence, not in separate hospital rooms, not in passing at an airport gate. This was something else. "Thank you," she said quietly. Michael looked up. "For what?" "For pretending this is normal," she said, "even when it isn't." He took a bite of bacon. "Who says it's not?" She didn't answer. Because somehow it did feel normal, or at least like a version of normal she hadn't dared imagine in a long time. "Dad, can we keep the girls?" Adam asked suddenly. Michael blinked. "Keep them? You know, like adopt them or something." "They're cool," Daisy beamed. "We are?" Amelia nodded. "We can help in the kitchen, and I draw menus." Michael glanced at Anna, waiting to see her reaction. She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "We're not ready to be adopted just yet," she said gently. "But we can stay for breakfast." The children accepted this as law, and returned to their syrup-drenched pancakes. After the plates were cleared, Anna stood and began washing dishes in the back sink. Michael joined her drying quietly. Their movements synchronized like they had done this 100 times before. "So what's next?" he asked. Anna didn't answer right away. Her hands moved through the water, slow and thoughtful. "I don't know," she said at last. "The car's still broken. I haven't checked in with the VA. The girls haven't been back to school since the hospital." Michael nodded. But this morning, she continued, they woke up laughing. "That hasn't happened in months. So maybe next can wait a little." Michael placed a clean plate on the stack. "Sometimes waiting is the bravest thing we can do." She looked at him. "How long did it take you to stop thinking about what I'd lost?" She nodded. He was quiet a long moment. "Then I haven't. But I stopped expecting it to go away. Grief's not a wound. It's a scar. You learn to live around it." Anna inhaled deeply, as if something had just settled in her chest. The bell above the front door jingled suddenly. Michael turned toward it, surprised. A young couple entered locals. Michael recognized them from the hardware store. He glanced at the clock. 8:04 a.m. "We're open?" the woman asked, hesitant. Michael looked at Anna. She raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "Looks like it." Anna turned to the customers with a smile that was still new, still healing, but real. "Welcome to Dawson's Diner," she said. Table for two. The day passed slowly at Dawson's Diner, slower than most. After breakfast, the twins helped Adam stack napkins and refill sugar dispensers, while Anna wiped down tables with a focus that belied her exhaustion. Michael watched her from behind the counter, one eye on the grill and the other quietly, unconsciously on her. By mid-afternoon, the lunch crowd had thinned to a few regulars. The bell above the door jingled softly with each entrance, each exit, but the rhythm was easy calm. It was the kind of day Michael hadn't had in years. No complications, no memories clawing at the edges. Just warmth, laughter, and the familiar sound of cutlery against porcelain. Until it happened. He was stacking clean mugs on the shelf above the coffee station when he heard it. "Excuse me," Miss said, an older man at the corner booth, a local farmer who came in twice a week for meatloaf and lemon pie. "You said your name was Monroe?" Anna paused, towel in hand. "Yes, sir," the man chuckled. "Any relation to General Daniel Monroe?" Michael dropped a mug. It shattered on the floor. The room went still. Anna blinked. "Yes," she said carefully. "He's my father." Michael stood frozen, hand midair. He didn't move, didn't speak. He barely breathed. The farmer smiled. "I served under him in '94. Best damn leader I ever knew." "Thank you," Anna said with practiced calm, but her eyes flicked to Michael, who hadn't yet moved. She bent to sweep up the broken mug, but Michael beat her to it. His fingers brushed hers for a second too long. When he stood, he didn't look at her. He just walked to the back kitchen without a word. Anna stared after him. In the silence that followed, the girls kept playing oblivious. The farmer returned to his pie. The bell jingled again, and someone new entered. But Anna didn't move. She followed Michael to the kitchen a moment later. He stood by the sink, both hands gripping the edge of the counter, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "You okay?" she asked gently. Michael turned slowly. "I didn't." "No," he said. "That you were his daughter?" Anna tilted her head. "Is that a problem?" He let out a breath. Not a laugh, not quite anger, something in between. "No, not a problem. Just a memory I wasn't expecting." She crossed her arms. "What kind of memory?" Michael's eyes glazed over slightly. "Kabul. 2005. I was part of a recon unit pinned down after an intel op went sideways. We were running low on ammo. 2 wounded. Radio was dead." Anna's posture shifted. He went on, voice low. "They told us no one was coming. that we were too deep in enemy terrain. That command couldn't risk a recovery team. She could see it now, the tremor just beneath his surface. But General Monroe overruled them, he said. He sent a Black Hawk in anyway. Flew with them. Sat in the open door himself, covering our escape. Michael looked down. He saved 6 of us that day. Anna felt her throat tighten. I made a promise, Michael said, finally looking at her. When I got home, if I ever had the chance to repay him, I would. Anything. No questions asked. She stepped forward, and now Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now I'm just wondering how long it took me to realize I was keeping that promise, without even knowing it. Silence. Then Anna asked softly, "Is that all this is to you? An old debt?" "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. "No, it's not. But it started there, didn't it?" Anna held his gaze. "Does it matter?" Michael swallowed. It didn't. It does now. They stood in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The air between them felt heavier than it had minutes ago, charged with something unsaid. Finally, Anna looked away. He doesn't talk about Kabul, or about the people he saved. He talks about regrets, and the ones he couldn't. Michael exhaled slowly. He did enough. More than most. Anna gave a small, tired smile. He would say the same about you. Michael looked at her, then not as a veteran, or a father, or a stranger who had stumbled into his diner, but as someone who had just crossed a bridge neither of them had built on purpose. They hadn't chosen this, but here they were. "I didn't mean to keep it from you," she said. "I didn't mean to forget the promise," he replied. Another long silence. Then Anna reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a worn photo folded at the corners. She handed it to him. It was a picture of her in uniform standing next to her father. He was older than Michael remembered, his hair grayer, his expression softer. But the presence was unmistakable. That was the man who had flown into hell for them. Michael stared at the photo for a long time. "He ever talk about me?" he asked, voice almost a whisper. Anna nodded. Not by name. But he mentioned a young sergeant who gave up his seat on the bird for a wounded medic. Said he watched him stay behind with a rifle and a prayer. Michael blinked. That was a long time ago. Not to him, she said. Not to her either. They stood in stillness once more, and then Anna turned toward the door. "I'll finish cleaning the tables," she said. "You can pretend this conversation never happened if that makes it easier." Michael didn't stop her, but just before she stepped out, he called her name. She paused. He looked at her, something softer in his eyes now. "Thank you for telling me." Anna nodded once, and just like that, she was gone back to the front, to the world, to the diner, where nothing had changed, and everything had. Michael stood alone in the kitchen photo, still in hand, heart suddenly full of things he hadn't felt in years. Memory, loyalty, gratitude, and something else too. Something like love, quiet, unspoken but growing, like a promise remembered. It was still early when the sound began, low and distant, at first like a far-off thunder. Michael was behind the counter slicing lemons for the iced tea when the vibration reached his feet. Subtle, rhythmic, the kind of tremor a soldier learns never to ignore. He looked up. Anna was refilling the napkin holders at the booth near the window. She froze too, her instincts kicking in posture, shifting slightly, eyes narrowing toward the street. The bell above the door jingled as Adam ran in, breathless. "Dad, you gotta see this." Before Michael could ask, he was already at the window. What he saw made him drop the knife. 20 military trucks, clean, sand-colored, and unmistakably official, were rolling slowly into town, like a silent parade. No sirens, no banners, just disciplined precision and a sense of purpose that made every passerby stop and stare. People began pouring out from shops, leaning out windows, phones in hand, murmuring. The convoy stretched all the way down Main Street engines, rumbling low flags whipping in the wind. And leading them in a black, unmarked SUV with government plates was General Daniel Monroe. Michael's throat went dry. Anna stepped beside him, her expression caught somewhere between confusion and dread. He didn't say he was coming. Michael opened the door and stepped out into the morning light. The first truck halted directly in front of the diner. One by one, the rest followed suit in perfect formation, stretching like a column of honor across the town's main artery. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. 24 soldiers in dress uniforms stepped out in unison. Not one moved toward the diner. They simply stood in line at ease, but solemn. And then the SUV door opened. General Monroe stepped out. His silver hair was combed back, his posture straight, despite the weight of years. His chest bore medals that only few in the nation had earned, and fewer still had survived to wear. But his face, when he looked toward the diner, wasn't stern or commanding. It was filled with something else. Recognition. Michael took one step forward. So did Anna. But the girls beat them both. Daisy and Amelia squealed with delight and tore through the front door, barefoot, running straight toward the man now standing beside the curb. Grandpa Michael's chest tightened so fast, he almost forgot how to breathe. The general dropped to one knee just in time to catch both girls in his arms. The rigid uniform softened instantly beneath the pressure of two small bodies, crashing into him, all curls and giggles and shrieks of joy. Anna stood frozen in the doorway, hands trembling. Michael couldn't move. The soldiers stood silently, not even blinking, as their commanding officer, one of the most respected generals in the country, hugged his granddaughters, like a man long exiled from love, finally allowed to return. The general looked up and met Michael's eyes. He stood slowly, letting the girls hang on to his arms. Then he walked forward, boots silent on the pavement, until he stood just feet away from Michael Dawson. His voice was deep-weathered, but unwavering. "Sergeant Michael Dawson." Michael stiffened. "Yes, sir." General Monroe nodded, eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but in a search for something old and buried. "I thought I recognized the name," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a piece of paper folded, creased and yellowed at the edges. He held it out. Michael took it. His hands shook. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was familiar, blocky, urgent, written in the back of a Black Hawk under fire. "You saved my life. If one day you need help, my door is open." DM Michael's breath caught. "I wrote that in the field hospital after Kabul," the general said quietly. "You stayed behind so my men could get out. You carried one of them on your back. I never forgot." Neither did Michael. But he had never expected the debt to be acknowledged, let alone returned. "I didn't know," he said softly, glancing at Anna. The general turned to his daughter. His expression was soft, full of pride, and something almost like apology. "You were the help I never expected to need," he told Michael, voice low. "And you gave it before I could even ask." Anna stepped forward, her eyes shining. "Dad, why are you here?" General Monroe looked at her, then at the diner, then at the town gathered silently around them. "Because my granddaughters called this place home." He turned to Michael again. "And because a man I trusted with my life once made me a promise. Now it's my turn to keep mine." Michael swallowed hard. Behind them, the soldiers stood still, an honor guard, without orders, witnesses to something deeper than ceremony. Then the general extended his hand, not as a superior, not as a symbol, but as a man. Michael stared at it. Then slowly, deliberately, he shook it. For a moment, no one moved. And then, without warning, the townspeople began to clap. It started softly from one old woman on the porch of the bakery. then another. Then the hardware store owner. The clapping spread like fire, slow and powerful. Not because of the trucks, not because of the medals, but because two men had remembered who they were and who they could still be. Anna wiped a tear from her cheek. Daisy tugged at Michael's sleeve. Mr. M. He looked down. Is Grandpa staying for pancakes? Michael glanced at the general, who cracked the faintest smile. Absolutely, Michael said. Pancakes for everyone. The diner doors opened wide, and for the first time since Kabul, Michael Dawson led a man he once followed into a place of peace. The diner had never been that full. Even during Ashridge's 4th of July pancake breakfast, or last year's firefighter fundraiser, Dawson's diner had never buzzed with this kind of quiet awe. 20 military trucks still lined Main Street, a living reminder that something rare had happened that morning. Inside, the diners sat in respectful silence. Soldiers sipped coffee in full dress uniform. Locals whispered to one another over pie and hush puppies. And at the center of it all, Michael Dawson stood behind the counter, staring down at the letter in his calloused hands. General Daniel Monroe sat at a booth nearby, flanked by his granddaughters, both curled up beside him like medals no war could earn. His uniform remained impeccable, but the years in his eyes had softened, especially now. Anna sat across from her father, silent, watching. Michael didn't speak for a long time. He just held the letter. Its edges were yellowed corners, creased, the handwriting smudged where it had been folded too often. One tear stain had warped the ink, but the words remained. You saved my life. If one day you need help, my door is open. DM Michael's thumb brushed over the signature. He remembered the moment the general had written it on a stretcher, ribs broken, breathing like gravel. The rescue had come too late for some, but not for Monroe. Michael had made sure of that, and then he'd forgotten. Or buried it, along with everything else. He finally looked up. General Monroe met his gaze. I was going to send it, the general said, voice low and steady. But then the mission went black. They told me you were presumed KIA. Michael nodded slowly. I was listed that way for 4 months. By the time they corrected the report, you were out. Off the grid. I didn't know where to send it. Michael swallowed, throat dry. Why bring it now? The general leaned forward, his silver eyes unwavering. Because my daughter and grandchildren would have spent another night in a broken-down SUV, if not for you. Because you gave them warmth, safety, dignity, and you didn't ask for anything in return. Michael lowered the letter to the counter. I wasn't trying to cash in a debt, he said. Didn't even know who she was. I know, the general replied. That's why it matters. Anna watched the exchange, the unspoken weight between the two men slowly lifting. She had grown up with the myth of Daniel Monroe, the fearless, tireless commander. But she had never seen him like this, humble, human, reverent. Michael broke the silence. That day in Kabul, you didn't have to fly in. The general's voice dropped. I did, because I couldn't sit behind a desk while my men bled out on a hillside. You understand that, don't you? Michael nodded. He did. Deeply. And you, the general continued, gave up your seat for a medic. You stayed behind, not because you had to, but because someone else needed it more. You don't forget people like that. Anna looked between them, her voice soft. And now, the general glanced at his granddaughters, then back at Michael. Now I return the favor. In full. He reached down beside the booth and pulled up a slim black case. Michael stiffened. Sir, I don't need "it's not a gift," Monroe interrupted. It's a correction. He opened the case. Inside lay a Distinguished Service Cross, polished, gleaming beneath the overhead light. One of the rarest medals in the U.S. Army. Michael froze. Anna gasped. Even the soldiers nearby sat straighter. You were recommended in 2006, the general explained. But paperwork went missing during the transition between commands. I reopened the file last week. I'm not active duty anymore, Michael said quietly. You're still a soldier, the general replied. Michael stared at the metal emotion flooding his chest in slow, overwhelming waves. Not pride, not even closure, but something deeper. Recognition. Anna stood. You deserve it, she said. You always did. The room held its breath as Michael reached forward slowly, reverently, and closed the case. Thank you, he said. Not to the metal, to the man, to the memory, to the moment. The general nodded once, sharp, respectful. Then, like the lifting of a veil, the room began to breathe again. Laughter resumed. Coffee poured. A baby cried somewhere in the back. Life returned. Anna moved to Michael's side, her voice low. You okay? He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. I think so. She smiled gently. He's never done that for anyone before. Not even at my husband's funeral. Michael blinked. He was your... She nodded. Ben served under him in Syria. Dad respected him, but he's never been great at grief. This, showing up like this. That's his way of trying to say he remembers what matters. Michael looked at her. And you? Anna's voice softened. I think I'm starting to believe that kindness has a long memory. Michael reached into his apron pocket and placed the letter back inside. Then he looked around the diner at the soldiers, the townsfolk, the little girls playing on the floor, and the general sipping coffee, while answering Amelia's 1,000th question about tanks. This wasn't just about a rescue in Kabul. It was about something much bigger. Legacy, repayment, healing, a circle slowly closing. And in the middle of it, quietly, humbly, was Michael Dawson. By evening, the sun dipped behind the low desert ridge, casting a warm, amber glow across Ash Ridge. The long shadows of military trucks stretched down Main Street like guardians standing watch. Their engines were now off soldiers, dispersed, some inside the diner, some outside, mingling with townsfolk over small paper cups of lemonade. But inside Dawson's diner, something rare was happening. A pot of stew simmered gently on the stove. Loaves of bread were warming in the oven. And Michael Dawson, once sergeant now, cook father reluctant recipient of a Distinguished Service Cross, was stirring the pot like it was a ritual older than war. Anna stood beside him, peeling carrots with the help of Daisy, who insisted she was a chef in training. Amelia was at the corner booth with Adam drawing a sign that read, "Thank you, soldiers. You are heroes." General Monroe sat at a side table with a local pastor and the mayor talking in low, respectful tones. His uniform jacket now hung on the coat rack, and in its place, he wore a Navy t-shirt with the faded outline of a service emblem. For the first time, he looked not like a general, but like a father, a grandfather, a man. Michael caught Anna's eye across the kitchen. You sure about feeding everyone? She raised an eyebrow. We've served bigger groups before, right? He smiled. Not all at once. Anna placed the carrots in the stew. We'll make it stretch, just like the field kitchens taught us. He chuckled. Only difference is this food actually tastes good. She nudged him with her elbow. Don't underestimate powdered mashed potatoes. They worked in tandem, moving easily around one another. No wasted motion. No awkward missteps. It felt natural, familiar, as if this wasn't something new, but something being rediscovered. At 6 euros sharp, Michael rang the old service bell near the register. Dinner's on, he called. The sound stirred the room. Soldiers and townspeople alike lined up in quiet, respectful order. Anna handed out bowls. Michael ladled. The twins passed out napkins like little waitresses. And the mayor, a woman named Linda Rosenthal, with a voice that could calm storms, stepped forward with a small American flag in one hand. She cleared her throat. I think she said, "We all know this town runs on more than gas and groceries. It runs on grit, on heart, and every now and then on someone quietly doing good when no one's watching." She looked at Michael. Today reminded us that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear aprons and show up at 6 a.m. to make sure there's hot coffee on cold mornings. There was a soft chuckle from the crowd. Michael looked down, suddenly very interested in the ladle in his hand. Mayor Rosenthal continued, voice steady. Michael Dawson didn't just help a stranded veteran and her children. He reminded this whole town what it means to serve, and for that, on behalf of Ashridge, we thank you. Applause rose genuine and steady, not for a medal or for rank, but for a man who had given more than most realized. Michael gave a small, respectful nod. I just made breakfast. That's where healing starts, the mayor replied. After the meal chairs were pushed aside, someone brought out an old guitar. One of the soldiers, a quiet young man named Ellis, turned out to have a voice like a smoky radio tune. He sang, "Take Me Home, Country Roads," and the whole diner joined in, some with voices, some just humming along. Anna leaned against the doorway, watching the scene with quiet wonder. "This feels," she began, but stopped herself. "Safe," Michael offered. She nodded. "I forgot what that felt like," she said. Michael leaned beside her, arms crossed. Sometimes we don't know how broken we are until we hear laughter again. Anna turned to him. "You did all this. You opened the door." He shook his head. "You walked through it." They stood there for a long moment, not speaking. Then General Monroe approached his granddaughters, tugging at his hands, already sleepy from the warmth of stew and music. "I think it's time we got them some real sleep," he said gently. Michael stepped forward. "We've got the old back room. Adam used it when he was little. Still has a bunk and some quilts." The general paused. "You sure?" Michael looked at Anna. She smiled. "We're sure." Later that night, after the guests had left and the dishes were done, Michael sat at the counter with 2 mugs of tea, his and Anna's. Outside, the street was quiet. The trucks were still their presence now, less imposing, more like sentinels at rest. Anna joined him, tying back her hair with a loose band. "Think they'll talk about this day?" she asked. Michael sipped his tea. "Maybe. Maybe not." She tilted her head. "You okay with that?" He looked at her. Really looked. What happened here today wasn't about recognition. It was about remembering. She nodded. "And forgiving." Michael raised an eyebrow. Anna looked down at her tea. "My dad and I, we haven't always agreed. On life, on grief, on letting people in. And now," she smiled softly, "now I think he finally understands what love looks like when it's quiet." Michael leaned back, exhaling. "That's the only kind I've ever known how to give." Anna turned toward him, something unspoken in her eyes. "Then maybe we're in the right place." He didn't answer, because he knew she was right. Outside the window, the flag on the diner's porch fluttered in the breeze, and on the wall behind the counter, the letter from 2005 now rested in a small frame just above a photo of a younger Michael and a much older General Monroe, standing side by side, smiling. The following week unfolded like a quiet song, each day, a verse, each sunrise a refrain. Michael had always lived with rhythm, the predictable clink of plates, the hum of the fridge, the smell of bacon crisping at 6:00 a.m. sharp. Dawson's Diner was his metronome, a place where nothing unexpected ever stayed for long. But now there were tiny sneakers at the foot of the booth, crayon drawings taped to the wall next to the daily specials board, hair ties beside the coffee machine, and laughter. So much laughter. Anna had stayed. What was meant to be a night or two until the car was fixed, until the storm passed, had stretched into something else. Something softer. Something they didn't name out loud for fear it might break the spell. She still wore her boots, still moved like a soldier, but now she carried a notepad in her apron pocket, took orders with a crooked smile, and burned the toast about half the time. Michael never corrected her. The girls were thriving. Amelia had declared herself assistant manager, which mostly meant telling customers where to sit and asking if they liked cats. Daisy appointed herself in charge of muffin inventory. And Adam? He hadn't stopped smiling in days. They worked like a team, Anna and Michael falling into unspoken routines. She knew when he needed quiet. He knew when she needed space. They didn't ask each other to explain the shadows beneath their eyes. They just stood side by side and let the healing happen. It was on a quiet Tuesday, under a sky so blue it almost hurt that everything shifted. The diner was closed for the afternoon. General Monroe had insisted on hosting a small private ceremony, not military, not formal, just something for the heart. Michael wore his cleanest button-down. Anna wore jeans, and her husband's old dog tag around her neck. The back patio had been dressed up with folding chairs, flowers in mason jars, and a faded American flag that had hung in Michael's garage since the day he came home for good. The townsfolk came quiet, respectful. Some brought casseroles. Others just stood in the sun, hands folded, as the general stepped forward with a wooden box in his hands. He looked at Michael. "At your request," he said, "we're making this informal. But that doesn't mean it's not sacred." Michael gave a small nod. The general opened the box and lifted out the Distinguished Service Cross once more. But this time he didn't hand it to Michael. He placed it on the table next to a photo one Michael hadn't seen in years. A grainy shot of his old unit, all 6 of them grinning under a canvas tarp days before Kabul. "You never claimed it," the general said. "You never wanted the spotlight. But your son deserves to know what kind of man his father is." Adam looked up from the front row. His eyes glistened. Michael swallowed hard. "Thank you, sir." The general didn't salute. He didn't make a speech. He simply stepped back and let the silence hold the truth. Afterward, they ate. They laughed. They stayed until the sun kissed the edge of the horizon and the light turned soft as memory. It was Anna who found Michael sitting on the diner steps long after everyone else had gone. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands clasped. The medal rested in his lap, forgotten. She sat beside him. "Why didn't you ever tell Adam?" she asked. Michael stared ahead. "Because I didn't want him to think being a hero came with a uniform. I wanted him to learn it came with choices." Anna was quiet a moment. Then she said, "He already knows." They sat like that side by side as the dusk deepened. Then gently she reached out and took his hand. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He just held on. A week later, the general organized a town blessing ceremony. It wasn't official. No paperwork. Just stories and hugs and a ribbon tied to the front door of the diner. Anna helped repaint the closed Mondays sign. Michael added one more word. Family. They were no longer just surviving. They were building. One evening, as the sun slid low and turned the countertops gold, Anna found Michael leaning against the doorframe, watching the girls color in menus. She stepped beside him. "They call you Dad," she said softly. He looked at her. "Do you want me to correct them?" She shook her head. "No. I want to know if you mind." Michael didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think I've been waiting to hear it for a long time." She turned to him. "I'm not ready to fall in love again," she said honestly. "But I'm ready to trust someone not to run." Michael nodded. "I don't run." They stood there, 2 soldiers in civilian clothes, surrounded by crayons, coffee and second chances. Then Anna reached into her pocket and placed something on the counter between them. It was Ben's wedding ring. "I think he'd want me to put this down now," she said. Michael didn't pick it up. He just placed his hand gently over hers. "I'm not here to replace him," he whispered. "Only to stand beside the space he left if you'll let me." Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. She simply nodded. Outside, the sky turned lavender. The neon sign flickered to life. Inside, laughter echoed from the kitchen. And on the wall behind the register, someone had hung a new photo. Anna, Michael, Adam, Daisy, and Amelia huddled in front of the diner, smiling beneath the words, "Dawson's Diner Home is where the healing begins." 1 year later, autumn returned to Ashridge like an old friend, golden leaves skipping down the sidewalks, the scent of cinnamon in every bakery window, and the kind of crisp air that made people linger just a little longer outside Dawson's Diner before walking in. But inside, everything had changed, and yet somehow nothing had. The tables were the same, the coffee brewed from the same machine that sputtered every 5th cup. The bell above the door still jingled off-key. But the photos on the walls told a different story now. Above the counter hung a new frame. It was a photo sun-washed, slightly off-center of Michael Dawson, shaking hands with General Daniel Monroe. Behind them, the townspeople stood in silence. Below the image, a brass plaque read, "Kindness never retires." On that morning, the diner was buzzing quietly. Locals gathered in familiar booths. Soldiers in civilian clothes laughed over second helpings. Kids played near the front, chasing crumbs and dreams. Behind the counter, Michael stood wearing an apron with a faded American flag stitched near the hem. A touch of gray had crept into his beard, and his posture, though still strong, carried something gentler now. Not weariness, not age. Peace. He poured coffee-plated eggs, wiped a table. Then he looked up because the door had opened. And there she was. Anna. Her hair was longer now, loosely braided over one shoulder. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater. But what stood out most was her smile, effortless, unburdened. She carried a tray of fresh muffins and set them near the register like she had done it every day for a decade. Moments later, Daisy and Amelia burst in, racing each other to the booth by the window. Adam, now taller, more confident, followed with a comic book under one arm and a tray of orange juice balanced perfectly in the other. Michael met Anna's eyes. She nodded. This was home. Not a waypoint, not a recovery room, a life. The bell rang again. This time it wasn't family or regulars. A young soldier stepped in. His uniform was clean, but rumpled. Dust clung to his boots. His eyes, sharp, scanning, betrayed the kind of fatigue that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from seeing too much in too little time. He looked around like he wasn't sure if he belonged. Michael stepped forward without hesitation. "You hungry, soldier?" he asked gently. The young man paused. I don't have cash." Michael placed a warm plate on the counter, a thick slice of sourdough fried eggs, crisp bacon. "This one's on the house," he said. "You're home now?" The soldier blinked, caught off guard. His shoulders loosened. He sat. Anna slid a cup of coffee in front of him without asking how he liked it. Daisy brought him a napkin and said with complete sincerity, "You look like you could use a hug, mister." The soldier chuckled, surprised at the burn in his throat. As he ate, Michael walked back to the kitchen just for a moment. There, beside the spice rack, hung a small wooden plaque carved by hand. Anna had given it to him on the first Thanksgiving they spent together. It read, "This is the table where healing begins." He stood quietly, hand resting on the wall, and closed his eyes. He remembered Kabul. He remembered being 29 and broken. He remembered carrying a man out of a blast zone with a prayer on his lips and no idea if he'd live to see another son. And now, here he was, serving breakfast, raising 3 kids who weren't all his by blood, but were entirely his by heart. Loving a woman who never asked him to replace what she lost, only to stand beside her and believe again. And somewhere always watching was the man who made it all possible. General Monroe didn't visit as often these days, but when he did, he never stayed long. He simply walked in, sat for 10 minutes, hugged his granddaughters, looked Michael in the eye, and left. He never said goodbye, because he'd already made his promise, and it had been kept. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the sky warmed to gold, Michael stepped outside for a breath of cool air. He watched the kids playing hopscotch with chalk on the pavement. Anna was laughing with a couple on the bench. From the window, the new soldier gave him a quiet nod. Michael nodded back. Then he looked up at the sky, his hands deep in his apron pockets, and he whispered, not to be heard, but just to be sure, "Thank you. Not for a medal, not for the trucks, but for what came after. A second chance, a family reborn, a quiet place where the wounds of war met the kindness of strangers and became something stronger than either alone." Inside, the bell rang again. Michael turned. "Time for one more plate. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, feel free to share what it meant to you. Your words might inspire someone else today. If you haven't already, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. We share true to the heart tales that remind us all of the quiet power of kindness, courage, and family. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching. We're honored to have shared this moment with you. Until next time, take good care of yourself and those you love.